This is a video I've been putting off for a very long time, and I've been dreading doing it. This is a video about my mom and how it affected my life for many years. She was schizophrenic, and some bad things happened, and I carried them with me for years. And I want to, let's start with the beginning stuff. My mom I'm adopted. My mom wasn't able to have kids, and my parents had me very late in life. I think they were like 45 years old, and they adopted me. They couldn't, they went through normal adoption agencies, but they were too old. They were giving kids to younger couples. And my mother decided to go the black market route. And what that means is they paid for me. Remember, my mom had told me once that it cost $4,500 to pay for me, the fee, to this woman who was in trouble. And my father was pissed off because we could buy a brand new Cadillac car for that price back in 1958. So my mother had it arranged that the woman who gave birth to me would check into the hospital under my adopted mother's name. Back and then they didn't ask you for ID when you went to the hospital. And the woman checked into the hospital, Mrs. Parrish, that's my real last name, and had me. I had a staph infection. I was in there for 10 days, and finally I got to come out. I remember bits and pieces from my childhood. We had a very 60s home. We had a Plymouth with the fins on the back, a 1962 or 64 Plymouth. In 1964 and 1965, we had a checker marathon. If you ever saw New York City, those big round bubble cabs, we had that. And we went to the World's Fair in 1964 and 65, and we sat on the Van Wyck Expressway in the middle of the summertime with our windows rolled up while everybody's windows rolled down, and they thought we were crazy. We were one of the first cars to have air conditioning. And I was so small, I was able to lie across the back on the floor with my adopted sister, who was 4 years younger than me. My mother would put down a blanket, and by the end of the day, we were exhausted and we would sleep for the ride home. I think before my sister came, I had my first birthday, and my mom invited all of her girlfriends over. And she set up a table for me in the other room, and I sat in the other room by myself. I remember I was all dressed up, sitting in a high chair, and there's some video of it somewhere. In that video, 8mm thing, and that was the beginning of stuff that was weird between my mother and how she thought of me. And I remember everybody was having a party in the other room, and I was just sitting there in a high chair all by myself while they ate cake, and I could see it through the doorway, but I wasn't allowed to be part of the party. My mother was, I don't know, kind of weird. We thought, kind of just different, neurotic, strange. But that was just the beginnings of schizophrenia, which turned into Alzheimer's, which she died of. Lots of crazy things happened. My father would leave for work at 8 in the morning, come back 6 at night, and I'd come home from school, and it was some of the most fearful points of my life. My mother got very violent as things went on. She was on some sort of rampage about something that I did or supposedly did, and she got a hold of me in a chokehold, and she dragged me to a radiator. A lot of this stuff is going to be hard to hear, so if you guys are sensitive to this stuff, you might want to hang up. And I fought her, and she struggled to tie me to a radiator. She was going to turn up the steam and burn me and teach me a lesson that I should be a good boy, whatever that was in our head. I remember one time when my sister was around, so I must have been 5 or 6. My sister was in her crib, and my mother came after me for something. I was always doing something wrong, I didn't close the door tight enough, I didn't push the chair in far enough, I sneezed at the wrong time. and she came after me with a broomstick, and I got under my sister's crib and I pulled the bars down, and she was sticking the broom, hurting me really bad with the broom, and I had a little stuffed monkey that I used to hold on to, and she grabbed it and pulled it away from me, and she says, "Now I'm going to kill your monkey." And she took a pair of scissors and she stabbed it, and I was screaming, "Don't kill my little stuffed monkey." It was the only thing that I had. And she said, "I'm going to cut its tail off to teach you, that you weren't a good boy or whatever you didn't do." And this was her mental illness. But as a child, I didn't understand this kind of stuff, right? She would come into my bedroom and she would tell me, 1 o'clock in the morning, the light would come on my bedroom. "Manny, are you asleep?" I go, "No." "Why? What's wrong?" "Get out of my house if you're not asleep." Well, she woke me up. I said, "But you woke me up." "I don't care. You're awake." It's snowing outside. I used to sleep in my underwear. Just my shorts, nothing else. And she'd pull me out of bed by my ear, and I'd scream and yell, and my father just couldn't deal with what's going on. He just put blinders on or completely ignored it. My mother dragged me down a flight of stairs and threw me out in the snow. And as a young kid, that was pretty frightening because I thought I was really out on the street and I didn't know where to go. And I started screaming and yelling, and I think I still have the scar here. I have a scar here somewhere where I punched my hand. I punched my hand through the glass and I shredded my head. And I wanted to come back in the house. I didn't know what I did wrong. And there was a kind, sweet lady across the street that heard all the yelling and screaming, came by with a blanket and put it around me and brought me to our house. And thank God for her. She went across, talked to my parents, and I got to come back, and I was always living in fear that these crazy things would happen. She threw me out several times over several months, and the neighbors were aware of it. And unlike today where you call child custody and all that kind of stuff, we were just a crazy family on the block, which was shame. My mother was mentally ill and needed to be treated, and there was nobody who could diagnose her because you wouldn't go to a doctor. It was something shameful, It was an incredible amount of stress as a kid. And then when I was about 10 or 11 years old or 12 years old, I'd sit at the kitchen table and my mother came up behind me and we're eating. And she was over grabbing some food and put the pan down and came up behind me and punched me in the back of the head. And I was like, "What?" At a certain point you get broken down and you just sit there and you kind of like, "What?" And she said, "You're picking holes in the bathroom tiles." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" "No, please," because I know I was going to be hurt. And she'd grab me by the ear and drag me into the bathroom. She says, "You take my bobby pins and you cut holes in the tiles and you fill them in with black eyebrow pencil to let me know that you're getting back at me for hitting you." Maybe in some way in her mental illness, she knew it was wrong that she was hitting me, and I don't know. And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Look, you see right over here?" Bam! She hit my head into the tiles and I'm bleeding and I just collapsed between the tiles and the toilet, and she just walked back off to the kitchen and I'm in tears. My father's just sitting there watching TV, not knowing what to do. My little sister wasn't aware. She was 2, 3, 4 years old, 5 years old. And I went to my room and I just cried, and the next day I went to go to dinner and she made an announcement. "I'm not cooking for you anymore. You're an animal. You're not going to eat with the family." And I went, "What did I do?" That's the rules and that's what it is. And then for about a year or two, I had to learn how to cook. I had to wait for the family to eat dinner and the dishes to be washed, and not only leave the room, but the kitchen light was shut off, and then I was allowed to come in and make food for myself. I lived on eggs, bologna, toast, whatever. I think I made like pudding one day, or rice pudding or something, and I was allowed to have access to a lot of the stuff was in cans. I would just heat up some green beans. That went on for a long time. then my mom started deteriorating even more, and the house became a mess. If you ever see the Hoarders TV shows or a movie like Grey Gardens, it wasn't dirty, there wasn't garbage, but there were piles of newspapers on the table, or laundry would be washed and put on a chair, and then that chair was full, so the next batch of laundry would be on a coffee table, and then that would spill over to a couch, and piles of newspapers. And I would go to school and I couldn't concentrate. I was hyperactive and crazy and all over the place. And at the end of school, my friend Victor Alonso, I started going to his house, and I wouldn't go home until my father came home, because I was frightened that my mother was going to do something to me. I was in 6th, 7th grade. And for a couple of weeks, I wouldn't come home. And then one day my mother stood outside the school, and I came down the steps and she was there, and I ran, and she went running after me. She had a pipe in her hand. You better come home, and all that kind of stuff. And the kids were laughing at me. I couldn't bring friends into the house. I didn't have friends, because friends hung out at friends' houses. You didn't have internet, you didn't have Twitter, you didn't have all this stuff. So you had to be face to face with all your friends. And whose house are we going to hang out? Your house, my house? Well, it was always their house. And my friends were like, well, how come I can't hang out at your house? So you're weird, okay, fuck you. See you later. And one day my mother came after me. I was 13, 14 years old. And my father just sat there. And my mother was ironing. And my father was playing piano. And my mother decided to walk around the ironing board and come after me for something, I don't remember what. And I shoved her so hard and she fell, and I said, you can go fuck yourself. And my father one time got up and told me, don't you ever talk to your mother like that? And he's grabbing me, and I picked up the iron and I put it right next to his head, and I said, you fucking pussy, you've allowed this to go on for way too long. If you fucking touch me, this iron's gonna go right in your head. I dropped it and everybody scattered. The next day, I came home from school. My mother started in with me, and I told her to go fuck herself again. And she hit me so hard, she knocked me unconscious. And we used to use the side entrance to get into the house. It was like an Archie Bunker kind of house, Brooklyn, semi-detached. There wasn't much room between the refrigerator, the walls on either side, and I had fallen down, blocked the door. I was unconscious. My father went to go open the door, and my body was on the floor. And he pushed the door open, and he said to my mother, what happened? And she said, I've had it with him. I'm going to kill him. Blah, blah, blah. And for the first time ever, my father took my mother and slapped her. Her glasses broke and went flying. And it was her house, not my father's. Her mother had left it to her, and she told him and me and my sister to get out. And we went to a hotel, and we lived there for 3 weeks. And it's so dysfunctional and so painful. And then I left home at 14, and that's why I left home, because it was so bad. What it was like for a kid to grow up that didn't, now I understand a lot of it, but to grow up and experience that for years and have shame and not be able to talk to anybody about it. My mother would drag me to psychiatrists saying, he's crazy. And I would tell them these stories, and then they would pull my mother in and say, look, you're the problem, you're crazy, we want to bring you into therapy. And she would open the door screaming, you're all crazy, and grab me and pull me down the hallway, let's go to some other doctor because you're crazy, not them. And it scarred me for a very long time. Gave me panic attacks. Made me very dysfunctional in relationships and love and being close to people for a long time. I know people had bad lives and a lot of people lives worse than me, but it affected my ability to just be normal. And I wanted so much to just be like everybody else. I mean, I'm glad I was different because I did music, but I just didn't want all the pain that came with that, all that craziness. So it was terrible stress for a young kid. I don't want to upset people with this, but this is just something I was going to put in my book and something I had to tell, and this is my book, my video book, and I'm letting it out. You're very lucky if you have parents. That was the other thing, is I remember, I used to say, why am I adopted? I know if I was with my real parents, this wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't treat me like this. And I used to lie in bed and just dream of what my real mother was like and how happy I would have been. When you have parents, you have a genetic bond with them no matter how screwed up they are. You always know your mommy is there. You go and hug them. There's a genetic bond. When you're adopted, your parents will tell you they love you and all that kind of stuff. But when it goes off the rails, it's like living with an aunt or an evil stepsister. They're not your parents. And when you're in crisis and you want to have a hug, and we didn't touch, we didn't hug, we didn't kiss, we didn't say I love you. And when you're in crisis and you just want to be protected and hold somebody, it's not there. So be lucky if you have parents, be lucky if you have family, no matter how screwed up they are. My adopted sister, my mother never bothered her. And my sister knew about all this. She's gone now. She's passed away. She didn't tell me until the very end that she didn't know how to deal with it. But my sister was free of all this. I was the firstborn, and I was expected to be perfect, I guess, in her mental illness. She wound up getting Alzheimer's. And I was living in the city. That was the Studio 54 hip-hop, bebop thing. I lost my record deal, David Bowie's manager, my loft, and my father called me all like within a day or two and told me my mother had died. I played Studio 54 that night. And I had a loft, and I was just in there for a week. I didn't answer the door. I was dressed in a pair of pajamas holding a teddy bear, and my friends broke down the door because they thought I was dead inside. I moved home to Brooklyn, and I took care of my father I gave up my music because I hadn't been paid, and I lived upstairs from my dad and watched him get old until he died, and I took care of him till the very end. You know, the last 2 years of his life, he moved down to Florida to be closer to my sister because I had been there for 25 years, and I couldn't leave the house without getting panicked that my father was going to die. My mother was gone. Anyway, I suffered panic attacks and a lot of shit, but it feels really good to get this out. People close to me know the story. People very close to me know the story. Friends know bits and pieces of it. Be lucky for what you have. If you've had a happy and a good life, be really lucky. If you've had a bad life, you may know what I'm talking about, and be strong. These whole video series, this is about survival. I had all these fabulous things happen, these horrible things, but I'm still standing, right? I'm not a junkie. I'm not in a straitjacket. I'm a little botched in the brain from it, but I'm still here in one piece. That's the mom story that I've been dreading to talk about for a very long time. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. I have a couple of good stories, and I got a doozy Boy George story. And we're coming to the end of this video series. A couple of more things, and I'll figure out something else to do live, or maybe some studio stuff. But thank you.